Okay, so I just found out that I can't load a video over 15 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and do this again, and I'm gonna try to be a lot more concise. Today, I'm going to be talking about what is a level of detail expression in Tableau and the basics. So how to write one, um, what does it output, or what can it potentially output? Okay, so let's jump into a workbook, and let's go ahead and answer this first question. What does LOD, or level of detail, even mean? Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and take us to the lowest level of detail of our data. I'm going to go ahead and bring us to the most granular level of our data, which is basically our data set. And so I'm currently connected to my sample superstore data set, and we're just going to go ahead and take a look at the orders table. I'm going to go ahead and select this view data icon, and let me ask a question here. If you can answer this question, you have a great idea of what is level of detail. Okay, so what does a single line item, what does a single row or record represent in this data set? I'll just pause for a few seconds. All right, so I know this data set pretty well. I know that each record or row represents a daily line item transaction. Okay, a daily line item transaction. So I'm just going to bring us to our orders field, and let's just take a look down this column. You'll notice that some values start to repeat, and that's because several items can belong on a single order. We can think of an order ID like a receipt number. If I go to Starbucks and order a nitrous cold brew and a coffee, or nitrous cold brew and a lemon bread, sorry, that's two items on my receipt, right? So every line represents a line item transaction. Okay. We have some other information there as well. Manufacturer, who the item was sold to, where it was sold, how would we categorize the item, and when it was sold. Okay. And there's some other information here as well. We know that the lowest level of detail of my data is at the daily line item transaction level. Now let's bring it back to the view, and now my view will also have a level of detail that's determined by the dimensions that I bring out into my view. And so here's what I mean. I'm just going to bring out a few. I'll bring out state to rows, and I'll bring customer name out by state. Now, what I'll see is my customer names nested within my states, and I'm just going to go ahead and filter this view down to Canada just to keep things nice and simple. Things are a little bit cut off here, so let's just make this title a little bit shorter. And great. And I'll bring out a measure as well, just so that way we can look at some numbers. And so what is the level of detail of my current view? Okay, so what I'm seeing is my sum of sales rolled up at the customer name within state level. So the level of detail of my view, a single line or record, represents a customer name within state. Okay, and I do think it's more technically correct to say both customer name within state. It isn't enough to simply mention the most granular dimension, which is customer name, because if I just say the level of detail of my view is at the customer name level, then we're simply rolling up my data on customer name. Now, it's a problem because it is possible for a customer to place an order in more than a single state. Catching it? Okay, great. So I know that my view has a level of detail that's determined by the dimensions in my view. Now I'm seeing some of the sales rolled up at the customer name and state level. But what if I wanted to output values that are aggregated at the state level? Okay. So not the customer name within state. I just want to know what is my sum of sales at the state level. So yeah, you're probably thinking, oh, why don't you just go ahead and create some subtotals? Yeah, I can totally do that, but I'm going to stick to the level of detail technique here. And let's go ahead and write this expression out. And we'll call this fixed. Again, there I need to preface that there are more than there are a couple LOD expressions. There's a fixed, include, and exclude. Today we're just going to talk about the fixed. In the next video, I will talk about include and exclude and those use cases. So we start with squiggly bracket fixed. I'm going to name the dimension that I want to roll my data up to and perform a sum of sales. And we'll close this with a squiggly bracket, and I'll call this fixed on state sum sales. Great. So I do need to mention that it is possible to list more than one dimension in your fixed expression. If you want to roll your data up to some different level of detail based on several dimensions, I can just go ahead and place a comma here and list the next dimension. Now this would just output the exact same numbers as my current view because my view is at the state customer level. All right, another way to think about this, let's just imagine that we're creating a mini data set rolled up at the state level, okay? And then we're going to relate that mini data set back to our view with our linking fields on state. Okay. If that doesn't click right away, that's okay. Maybe replay and pause and try to have that sink in. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this new field out into my view. And let's just take a look. Notice that I have this 11460 repeating a few times, and in British Columbia I have this 2763 repeating a few times as well for every customer in British Columbia. And so this 11460 is just the sum of these values. Okay, it's just my sum of sales on the state level, and this 2763 is just the sum of these values. Okay, so yeah, you might be asking, what is the point? We're seeing these numbers repeating, and so a simple example would be if I wanted to perform a percent of total sales contributed by each customer on the state level, I could use this number in the denominator to create that calculation, right? So let's go ahead and open up an editor, and I'll bring my sum of sales in here, divide that by the output of that fixed expression. And I'll just call this percent of total sales. Okay, let me go ahead and change this to a percentage, single decimal place, just arbitrary. I'll bring this out into my view. Okay, and there we have it. This should add up to 100%. By the way, there is a calculator. I can pull out the show summary card, so I can use this as a calculator. If I just go ahead and highlight here, that adds up to 1 or 100%. Okay, these add up to 1. Great. Okay, so we got to write out a fixed LOD, and we saw that we're able to perform an aggregation that's at a different level of detail than my view. So where can that come in handy in a viz? I'm just going to create a simple map on the state level, and I'm just going to go ahead and filter down to Canada. And let me edit this map a bit. Background layers. And I'm just going to remove this data layer here, that built-in demographic data, and we'll just stick to our sales here on the state level. Okay, let's just bring the labels out. All right, so let's ask the question, what is the level of detail of this visualization? Okay, the level of detail is the state country level. Okay, so my sum of sales is rolled up at state country. Great, and if I scroll over, okay, I get some information. Now, what if I wanted to see the sum of sales on the country level? I want to know, what is my total sales in Canada in my tooltip? Okay, and now I can actually use a fixed level of detail expression. And I already have that written out, so I'll just pull this up and make that really big. So now fixed on country, return the sum of sales. Okay. And I'll just relate this back to my view. I'll bring this out into the tooltip. And there it is, fixed on country, sum of sales. Total sales in Canada is 29,333. Okay, and I'm just going to do a little bit of formatting. Yeah, let's go ahead and format this. And in the pane, we'll change this to a currency. And I'll do the same thing for my sales here. Okay, cool. And I just want to color these in blue so they stand out. Okay. And there we have it. Yeah, I'm just gonna rename this country sales. So I've created a calculation, I've done an aggregation that's at a different level of detail than my viz. Now, this is an extremely basic application of an LOD expression. Let's just say that things can get pretty complex very quickly if we start doing things like a cohort analysis, or we want to do a frequency distribution of some value that we have to create. I'm going to show that in another video. We'll say the next video I'll show a couple examples, but a couple other examples of a fixed LOD application. All right, so I'm back in the crosstab, and I'm just going to clean this view up a little bit. Maybe I don't want to see these numbers repeating. I just want to see this number next to state. Okay, so I do need to turn this thing into a header. So I'm going to grab this and drop it off in rows, switch this to a discrete field, and I'm just going to drag this to the left. I'm going to go ahead and format this to a currency. And there we have it. We have a view with aggregations at different levels of detail. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys here in the next one, where we'll talk about the include and exclude LOD. We'll look at more examples, and have a good one.